yesterday's news.
Hello and welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news of the day through the papers of yesterday. We return to trains this week with the news, of course, that the Isle of Man steam train from Douglas down to Port Erin is resuming service again for the 2025 season, which made me go scurrying back through the archives. Plenty of stories, as you might imagine, about trains over the years. And quite a few ring true, perhaps, with issues today. Let's turn to the Manx Sun of Saturday, August the 22nd, 1903 first. The steamer and the train service. The article starts, "We publish elsewhere an account of a midnight experience which the Lord Bishop of Liverpool and others recently had through want of a connection between the arrival of the Liverpool steamer at Douglas and the departure of the train south. The Ben Macree, leaving Liverpool at 5:30pm, reached Douglas at 11, and as the last train on the Castletown line left at 10:55 or shortly afterwards, Dr. Chavas and a number of other persons desirous of going by train were in a sad plight. The night was wet and cold, and the only course open for the belated travellers was to stay in town for the night or hire conveyances. The bishop and his party preferred the latter, and reached Castletown in the early hours of the morning in a drenched and miserable condition. This, briefly, is the tale of woe which the correspondent tells. He has a proposal, it goes on, which he puts forth as likely to remedy the evil, and that is that the trains should wait for the steamers. We are afraid the proposal is not a practical one. It must be remembered that the Isle of Man Railway is not like the great systems across the water running double lines and capable of putting trains on at a few moments' notice without much inconvenience to anyone. With a single line, things are very different. The traffic has to be worked outward with due regard to the running of trains inward, inasmuch as they meet at the various double-line crossings, and it is not as easy a matter as the correspondent seems to think to put on an additional train to suit the requirements of the few or many passengers who may cross by steamer. As far as possible, the railway management endeavour to meet the needs of their patrons, but they cannot be expected, because a boat happens to be late, to delay a train for an indefinite period. Probably some improvement might be made on the present system, and if it be possible, we are sure Mr. Stoll, the General Manager, will readily do whatever he can to meet the public wishes. The experience of Dr. Chavas and his friends was certainly an unpleasant one, but we cannot regard it as singular either to the insular railway system or to that of the mainland." Sounds vaguely familiar, doesn't it, with perhaps boats going the other way, or perhaps planes meeting other planes? We turn to the Isle of Man Examiner of Saturday, November the 4th, 1916. And if you ever thought there was an argument to be had about what's value for money and what people are interested in when it comes to boat services or plane services for the Isle of Man, this might prove perhaps it's not a new argument. The Manx steamer and train services. Mr. Cunningham's committee appointed to consider the question of nationalisation of the steamboat service to and from the island does not seem to be producing any more results than dozens of other similar committees which have been appointed for other inquiries. Good to see committees were still going strong well over 100 years ago. Nor do I think the public care a jot whether the committee is active or inactive, or whether the steamers are nationalised or sold to an English concern. The public are quite prepared to pay whatever fare is demanded, go hither and thither under whatever conditions the company likes to offer, and while the money, now so plentiful with so many, lasts, simply growl and blame the war. I don't think we can blame the war anymore, can we? We just blame everything else. That both the steamer service and the railway service to and on the island are not as they should be is generally conceded as a fact. Beginning to ring any bells yet? That the public know quite well that both companies are more interested in producing dividends than in producing the greatest possible comfort for their passengers is just as well understood. But the means of remedying both evils are not so easily understood. Shareholders and directors of these companies form the bulk of our public men, and in consequence we hear little or nothing of the comforts or discomforts or the character of the fares peculiar to their services. Yet the facts are there, and as private ownership of these services has failed to give but the very minimum of reasonable comfort while charging the maximum of fare, It is about time that the public demanded the transfer of insular transport devices from private ownership to the ownership of the people, to be worked solely by and in the interests of the people of the whole island. But then, here again, we are up against the highly fortified redoubt of home rule and vested interest. You cannot kill the vitality of the financial octopus by reforming home rule. Yet, although many men are safe for their seats in the Keys under the present or reformed constitution, I will bet my last week's wages on this earth that were they to face the whole island as a constituency, democracy would end their parliamentary career. Of course, they weren't voted in then, to the best of my knowledge. But that might ring a few bells overall, if we think ferry services to and from the island, maybe. I don't know. The Ramsey Courier, Friday, September the 29th, 1961. The last train steams out. New timetable closes the Ramsey-Michael line. When the 4 to 5 p.m. train steamed out of Ramsey railway station last Saturday, it was probably the last passenger service on this route for the winter. Thus, for the first time since the Ramsey-Douglas line was opened on September the 23rd, 1879, there is not a daily service on weekdays between the two towns. 1961 this was. The new timetable, which was issued last weekend, came into effect on Monday, and it shows that so far as Ramsey and Douglas is concerned, buses have been substituted, and children on the Ramsey-Michael route, who last week travelled to and from school in Ramsey by rail, are now going by road. The timetable shows that there is one train a day on the Douglas-Peel section. This leaves Douglas at 12:30 p.m. and arrives at Peel at 1:30. It returns from Peel at 1:25 and arrives at Douglas at 1:58 p.m. On the South Line, there are 2 trains each way per day. Trains go from Douglas to Port Erin at 10 a.m. and 2:20 p.m. and leave Port Erin at 11:20 a.m. and 3:40 p.m. And then finally, of this little brief scurry through some of the train stories over the decades, the holiday news. Saturday, September the 3rd, 1966. Then, perhaps, as now, someone bemoaning the loss of the trains. Steam Trains is the letter entitled. My family and I have just returned from an enjoyable 14 days holiday on your lovely island. I've been to many places in England and abroad, but I still come back to your pleasant land. You have everything for a visitor, beauty abounds wherever you go, and I'm always recommending it to all people I come into contact with. He's after a freebie, isn't he? This happens to be my 3rd visit, and every time I come, I see something new. Your new sea terminal caught my eye. What a lovely piece of construction. That would be the lemon squeezer, still there today, of course. My biggest disappointment was the loss of your steam trains. How I missed them. I enjoyed some wonderful outings on them. They were such a novelty which my children enjoyed, and they took you south, east and west of the island through delightful scenery. Could they not be brought back for the holiday season? I'm enclosing a snapshot of my wife and children taken on the road to Ballasalla. As you can see, we are at the ferry bridge. And that was from Mr. J. Pinfold of Schoolhouse in Percy Street, Nottingham. And there are many today, I dare say, who would agree with Mr. Pinfold about the sad loss of the trains. But at least we still have, happily, the Port Erin route to enjoy. So not all is lost. The trains, of course, all old news. Until next week, cheerio.
You're gonna be yesterday's news.